Let's kick it!
Hey, this is Dr. Kristina Hallett, author of Own Best Friend, 8 Steps to a Life of Purpose, Passion, and Ease. And I'm kicking it with Doree.
Welcome to the Kicking It with Doree show. This is Doree Allen Nieves. Dr. Kristina Hallett is a board-certified specialist in clinical psychology with a private practice in Suffield, Connecticut. Kristina has over 20 years of experience providing psychotherapy, clinical consultation, coaching and supervision to medical and mental health professionals in addressing relationship and major life challenges. She is a certified divorce mediator and a nationally certified parenting coordinator. She is currently an associate professor in graduate psychology and coordinator of clinical training at Bay Path University. Kristina's specialty is assisting professional women to reduce stress, increase resilience and productivity, and start being their own best friend. She is the author of the international bestseller, Own Best Friend, 8 Steps to a Life of Purpose, Passion, and Ease. And now I'd like to welcome to the show, Dr. Kristina Hallett. Welcome to the show, Kristina.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
Is it okay if I call you Kristina, or do
Yeah, no, go ahead and call me Kristina, because, we're chill like that, and we're just talking.
That's great. Everybody knows how loose and relaxed I am, so I'm really excited to have you on today because I just came out the blue from nowhere, was like, hey, I found her email. Hey, I love your book, and I want to work with you. So welcome to the show again. What I specifically was contacting you about was your book, Own Best Friend. And a lot of people say that, I need to be my own best friend, or, I am my own best friend, or I have this many best friends. But it's kind of a term, best friend or BFF or whatever, is kind of a term that gets a lot of overuse. Just even the word friend, that could be used so many different ways, whether you're talking about relationship, oh, that's just my friend. And it could have several different meanings. Or if you're talking about social media, oh, well, that's my Facebook friend. Well, are they really your friend in real life? Or is it just somebody that popped up and you accepted them, but they're not the word friend is kind of ambiguous now.
Absolutely.
So when you talk about being your own best friend, what is a little summary of what you mean by that?
I am thrilled that you asked me about that. And it really came from the concept of thinking about that we do talk a lot about having a best friend or having friends. And really, as women, it's important that we have a supportive social circle and a network and people that we can connect to. So we'll just call those our supports, our family, or our friends in that sense. And so here's the thing that really was behind the whole book and everything that I'm talking about, which is if your close friend is having a hard time and they come and talk to you about something, you respond to them in a caring, compassionate, and loving way. Hopefully you're realistic with them. You're not just blowing smoke to them, but at the same time, the language that you use and the way you talk to them is generous. So if your friend says, hey, I screwed this up, or I'll never get a date again, or nobody likes me, your response is usually something like, you might have screwed that up, or look, it's okay, you're awesome, you're wonderful. Maybe you could try this, but you're a fabulous person. Things are going to work. And those are absolutely caring, compassionate, loving responses. But when it comes to the things we think in our own head, we don't talk to ourselves that way most of the time. So in our own head, if we start with, oh, I screwed up, I can't believe I did that, we often then go on to, oh, and I'm a screw up, or I'll never get it right, or I can't, or something's wrong with me. That suddenly the language and the way that we speak in our own head is nothing like the way we talk to our friend. We're nice to them, but the stuff that we say to ourselves about ourselves usually is not nearly as nice. So for me, the concept of being your own best friend starts with, hey, I am going to be as caring and wonderful to myself as I am to those who are my support system. Because, son of a gun, maybe I should be part of my own support system.
That is so powerful. Those things that you think about yourself are so much stronger than the things that other people tell you at times. It really depends on the the weight that you put on that relationship with a person. I guess it varies. Sometimes a stranger can say something to you and it'll really profoundly affect you, but that goes to your self-esteem. But I think that what we think about ourselves is greatly a factor in other things in the way we see the world, as opposed to what our friends may tell us. And you're right. We would never say to our friend, well, nobody, likes you because you're whatever. You would encourage them. And those negative internal messages that you have for yourself are so strong. So for instance, if you go to your child, your spouse, or your friend, and you're talking about, some way that you screwed up or something like that, then you may be down on yourself and they might say, you know what? That is going to be okay. Everybody makes mistakes. You'll get through it. It's not that bad. They're going to be encouraging. But if you leave that conversation and you don't digest what they've said and you continue to marinate and keep on saying those things to yourself over and over again, yeah, I suck. This is never going to work. If you just keep on relaying those thoughts to yourself, you're not doing anybody any good. And I would argue that you really can't be someone else's friend too well when you're doing that to yourself all the time.
Oh, you know what? Just as you were talking, I was thinking about one of the women in the book who literally was in a place where she couldn't take a compliment. And so, literally anyone would say anything positive to her and she'd be like, yeah, no, that's not really true. Or, oh, it's nice of you to say that. But she literally could not just say, oh, thanks, and feel good about it. And so one of the things we did in our coaching was for me to say to her, wow, what kind of a friend are you being when you can't accept something that someone else is telling you from their heart? What does that say about that? And that was really a life-changing moment for her because she's like, well, maybe they're just trying to make me feel nice. I'm like, oh, how nice do you feel when you genuinely say something to somebody and then they shoot it down and say, oh, that's not true at all. And she was, her response was like, I didn't think I wasn't being a good friend by doubting what they said. I'm like, well, but if you have an open and trusting relationship with someone and they're saying something that is kind, granted, it's an issue about your self-esteem, but they think it, they feel it. Maybe you want to consider not just rejecting what other people say. Maybe, in fact, since there's someone you trust, you may want to think about taking it to heart and seeing how that applies. And really, in our next couple of coaching sessions, that was the main theme. And then she came back and kept talking about this has made such a difference. That as she practiced accepting the care that was coming from other people, no surprise, she felt better. And feeling better gave her a little more energy and a little more motivation to do some of the other things that she had already identified she needed to do to continue feeling better. And so it was this wonderful reinforcing upward spiral where things continue to get better and better, literally starting with understanding that accepting encouragement or praise or compliment from someone is what it means to be part of a friend.
Absolutely. And so that's our first major point. When you're being your own best friend, you can automatically be a better friend to other people because it's a reciprocal thing. And I'm glad you brought that up. I have read Dr. Hallett's book from beginning to end. I've highlighted it on my Kindle. I've copied and pasted it into my Evernotes. Or it may not all be things that you've never heard before, but what I like about her book is that she gives you really, really practical ways of implementing those things. And so she's going to talk about her 8-step process in a moment. But if you go to one of those chapters and you say, okay, well, that's the subject of this chapter. I don't have a problem with that. Read it anyway. Read the whole thing because every other section, she's giving examples with her clients and different things that she's come across. And then she gives you this section that's called try this. And so try it. Yeah, you may have heard of meditation before, but she's going to tell you what to try. She's going to tell you you've got to practice. You can't just I've seen this before. I've heard of this before. Sit down and try it at least one good time and do it. Or, if there's something that you could pick up, maybe you could pass it on to one of your best friends, that may be struggling in that area. Sometimes you're weak in an area and they're not so, they're stronger, and vice versa. So, yes, indeed, that's one of the things I love about it. Some self-help and some personal development books don't necessarily give you a lot of nuts and bolts of how to implement things. They might say, oh, you know what? You need to feel better. You need to, say some affirmations or do something. She's going to give you really detailed things to try so that you can really work on it, because nothing will get better by just reading something. You have to have action.
Absolutely, absolutely truth right there. So when I created this book, what I really was trying to do was come up with simple, easy to implement strategies that anyone could do in about 5 minutes or less per strategy per day. And literally, other than one thing that you would do on the internet that's in there that has to do with the values and actions strengths inventory, that's part of one particular chapter. But other than that, you don't need any tools or anything except yourself, your mind, your body, your spirit, and a little bit of time. And that was my primary goal, because if I just say, exactly as you said, hey, go do this, and I don't tell you how to do it, or I don't give you a way to do it that seems easy to do, then you're not going to do it. I have read, I can't even count how many different personal development and self-help books, and I've gotten so many things from them. I've also been in practice working with people for over 20 years. So I've taken all of that and sort of distilled it down to the things that I know have research behind them, have practical experience behind them, but more importantly, are the kinds of things that people are willing to do. So for example, if I said to someone, okay, the one thing that'll make you happy is if you never have chocolate again for the rest of your life, that might be a really hard thing to commit to, right? That might seem like a really big deal. Or if I said, well, the one thing that's going to make the biggest difference in your life forever is if you climb 40 flights of stairs a day. Same thing. There's not going to necessarily be a lot of buy-in, because both of those seem like really big tasks that will never change. And the try this sections are all tips and techniques and strategies of things that you can do that don't take a lot of time, but can literally become as natural as breathing. And I'll just give you one example on that, because I just did one while we're talking. So in some of the sections where I talk about stress, one of the things that I say is that you need to pay attention to your body, and you're going to get always little hints from your body about what's going on. So if you periodically just bring your attention to your shoulders and then actively drop them down, you'll notice, A, that they were sort of creeping up, and shoulders and neck is where many of us hold tension. And B, by taking a breath and dropping your shoulders down, you are releasing that tension or releasing that stress. So right now, I noticed all of a sudden my shoulders, I just dropped them, and I thought, oh, that felt really good. This isn't a bad stress. Like, I'm really happy that we're talking, and I love talking about this. So this is super fun for me. So there's good stress in the same way as there's it doesn't feel so good stress. But either way, we want to pay attention to our body and the messages that our body's giving us. And what did that take? That took, 2 seconds of me noticing and another 2 seconds to drop my shoulders. Simple, and you could do it all day long.
That's where I hold all my tension, is in my shoulders and everything. And I've heard of different things that I can do about that, but I like those short, concise sections of try this, because it's worth it to go through and see what else you can pick up, because this is a very knowledgeable person who has tried them herself and has tried them with her clients. I want to get to the 8-step process that you highlight throughout the book that will help someone learn how to become their own best friend.
Okay. So as an overview, the 8-step process is called the Empowers process. And I'll go through and tell you what each one of them are. And it's a cumulative, integrative process. So as you mentioned, you could start at any step of the process and still build upon it. But ultimately, each one of the areas is intertwined with the rest, so that at the end of the entire 8-step process, whatever order you do it in, you've got an outcome that's bigger than each of the individual steps. So the first one is E, which is enhance your energy. And I can just run through the 8 of them first. Enhance your energy is the first. M is make extra time. P is practice perspective. O is own your best self. W is wake up your inner badass. E is envision your inner purpose. R is release the blocks and go for it. And S is shine your light brightly. Those are the 8 steps altogether.
Yes, and like I said, there were a couple that popped out to me like, okay, I definitely need to do this, but I said, let me just see what can I glean from everything, because the way that your book is organized is kind of unique. So can we touch on each one of them briefly? We're not going to like give away the whole thing, but we just want to touch on what each of these things is.
Yes, absolutely. So just starting from the beginning, E, and enhance your energy. That really has to do with the fact that lots of times we find ourselves exhausted. We believe that we're tired all the time. And we sort of say, yeah, like self-care would be great, but I don't have the time for self-care. And I'm too tired to do that. And I think of that almost as if you're like a hamster on a wheel, going and going and going. And one of the main concepts in the enhance your energy is looking at how well do you utilize the skill of asking for help? How well do you utilize the skill of accepting help? And how good is your skill at setting boundaries? So those are 3 component parts to how you would enhance your energy. And a piece of that, and you can tell just from those kind of skill-based areas, is that many of us really don't say no. We feel compelled to take on all sorts of things, and we don't ask for help because we've got that message running through our head that says, well, I should be able to do this, or so and so does that, or it's my responsibility to do those kinds of things. And so all of those mental lists of everything that we should be doing begins to suck away some of our energy and gets us to a place where we're just feeling tired and overwhelmed all the time. So that's one of the ways, and there's details about all of those, to begin enhancing energy. Another key concept that's in this particular chapter is the idea of how we define failure. So lots of times we say, oh, I tried this and I failed, and therefore we stop. But if we define failure, what we previously called failure, as the success in making an effort or taking action, that makes a pretty big shift in our perspective and how we look at things. And one of the things I talk to my clients about a lot is, the first time you went to ride a bicycle without any training wheels, you didn't just sail off into the sunset, you know?
Right.
Like you wobbled, you fell, you skinned your knees. But we don't say you failed at learning to ride a bike. We said, oh, you kept working at learning to ride a bike and then you rode the bike.
Mm-hmm.
Or go back even earlier, the first steps you took as a baby, you wobbled like a weeble and then you fell down, you know? And you had to keep doing that. You had to hold on to things and take a couple steps and face plant a few times or more than a few times before you got the hang of walking. So you weren't failing at walking. We see that with kids. We see that with bikes. Like, there are ways in which we look at our life and we give ourselves sort of the credit and the benefit of the doubt and understand it's a process. But then there's all these other things, particularly as an adult, we're like, oh, see, I'm no good at that. And so every time that we take action, regardless of the outcome, we're having a success, because action is what success is taking action and making an effort and then learning from it. Because if you didn't get the outcome you want, shift it up a bit and try something different.
Those examples you used, about failure, each of them, you fell and then you got back up and you tried again. And no matter how often we hear that, we're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But we really did it. And there was determination. I don't know of any child, any baby or infant, toddler, whatever, that tries to start walking and is like, oh, I fell. That's it. And they just go back to crawling and they go back to sitting down and rolling around. They all are very determined. It's like they don't even have a concept of I can't do this or I want to give up. There is something that keeps them going. Same thing with the little kids riding the bikes and stuff. They see other people doing it, whatever their motivation is, they keep on getting up. It never occurs to them that they should stop. And there's somewhere along the way that we come to a point where I don't know what those voices are. I don't know if it's an internal thing. It's different variables for different people. But there's something that may come along the way to say, you know what, just give up, stop trying. And I don't know what that is. We weren't born with it.
Right. Exactly. And that's why I'm saying, let's think back to the things that each one of us did when we were a kid, right? Every single one of us had to learn to walk and to move around. And maybe most people tried riding a bike, but if it wasn't a bike, it was something else. And going back to that attitude and that approach and applying that to our life today. And so I talk a lot in the book about really celebrating all sorts of successes, which can sound pretty funny. An example of that would be, you could say, oh, wow, good for me. I made time to eat lunch today. And then that feels really good because that's an important part of what you had decided your plan was, is that you needed to eat lunch so that you had a break and you had energy to get through the day. And there's like a million different positive things that come from eating lunch. And if you say, oh, good for me, I ate lunch, that sets you up for yet another success. If instead, even if you ate lunch, if what you say to yourself is, oh, I had to just scarf down my lunch so quick because I was running late and I never have enough time to eat, that's a perspective that is not giving you that enhanced way of feeling. There's no success in that. And it's a take on the situation that isn't allowing you any compassion or self-care or opportunity for success. I've been telling people recently that, and it just sounds so silly, but that's why I'm going to tell you about it. So my current major success that I literally celebrate has to do with automatic sinks and automatic towel dispensers. Over the last few months, between launching my book and I'm a speaker as well. So I've been going to different places and giving talks and doing speeches. So I've been flying a lot. You go to the airport, got to use the restroom. It's all automatic sinks and automatic towel dispensers. And at first, I would try to, and I couldn't get them to work. I'd put my hand everywhere. I'd watch where somebody else did it. Like I couldn't get the water to come out, or I'd get the water, but not the soap. Or I'd be lucky enough to get the water and the soap, but I couldn't get a paper towel. And it started off being really frustrating. And that frustration would have an impact on how I felt about flying or where I was going or what was going to happen. So because I utilize the Empowers process myself all the time, I picked up pretty quickly. It wasn't that hard to notice what a difference it was making, just this little thing. And so I began looking for those opportunities when I was able to do it. And so I would get the sink to work and I'd be like, oh, good for me. I got the sink to work. Now, clearly, it doesn't actually take any real skill to be able to get an automatic sink to work, right? But it was still a success in an area that had been very frustrating to me. And I'm happy to report that I now have an unbroken record of about 4 different round trip flights and several different airports where I have 100% of the time gotten the water, the soap, and the towel dispenser to work. And I feel like a rock star every time. I'm like, look at me, walking out, got my hands washed and dried.
Exactly. That's funny, but yes, sometimes those little things do really matter and they can get to us. So, yeah, celebrate those little successes. You mentioned another word that is part of your Empowers process, which is the P, practicing perspective. And that was probably the chapter that spoke to me the most. If I had to really pick a favorite section, that would be it, because I personally sometimes, have to bring myself back to that perspective thing. And I mean, I was like highlighting and all kinds of stuff. Like, I'm like, I got to remember this stuff. I can't forget it. I'm going to have to keep going back to it. And so I want to read a little short quote out of the book. So those of you that are listening that also may have an issue with perspective can get it or reflect on it or say, yeah, mm-hmm. She said, "There's always another point of view, even when we can't see past what's right in front of us. The trick is to get outside of the situation or above it, to tap into the meta view that isn't blocked by our emotions. Getting to a meta view means you're seeing the forest rather than the trees. It's like going up in a plane and then looking out the window at the place you just left." And I mean, that is so awesome. It's like you always do that. Anyone that's ever been on a plane, you look outside during takeoff or landing and you're like, wow, they look like little toys down there. Like, that's where I was. Those little cars look like toys. That highway looks like nothing. I'm so frustrated driving and commuting, but now that I'm in the clouds and I look down, it's not really that big of a deal.
Exactly. Right. And so anytime that we can take that meta view on what's going on, that gives us more objectivity. So it doesn't get us as emotionally wound up, right? And it gives us a much clearer perspective. The concept that's related to that is it's not about you except when it's about you. So one of the things that we often feel is that people are judging us or thinking about us negatively. And an example is you go into a store and you say, "Oh, can I get some help?" The person's busy doing something. And you see that that person gives you what you think is a snotty look, or they take their time, or they come over and they're not giving great customer service. And you feel like, oh, they were rude to me. What's wrong with me? I didn't do anything. We get this whole thing like it's about us. And yet the truth of the matter is, chances are mostly that it's not about us. It's about them. Because each one of us is completely and totally responsible for our own thoughts, feelings, and actions. And we're not responsible for anyone else's thoughts, feelings, and actions. That's everybody else's job. So when all we have to do is be in charge of our own thoughts, feelings, and actions and stop taking on what we imagine is going on for somebody else, but just deal with who we are and how we want to be, it gets a lot easier. I talk about the example of going into high school and feeling like you have a pimple and knowing that every single person is going to be staring at your pimple all day long. And you just know that. You don't even want to go. You're like, oh God, it's a pimple. What am I going to do? Like, can I wear a bag over my head? This is going to ruin my life. And yet later on in life, you look back and you think, oh, how about that? Really, everybody was worried about their pimple or their clothing or their exams or whatever they were worried about. But they weren't worried about you. You were worried about you. They were worried about themselves. And when we're in high school, we really don't get that. And then even as adults, we often really struggle with keeping in mind that it's not about us. We're responsible for ourselves, and everybody else is just doing their life based on who they are, really not who we are. So the person at the sales counter who you think gave you a snotty look, she might have been trying to multitask, or maybe she just got a call from someone breaking up with her. Or, she's in her own head thinking, how am I going to pay the rent this month? And her reaction to us has nothing to do with who we are. It's her dealing with who she is. And if we keep that in mind, that helps us get into that meta view and understanding that, the chances are, A, it's not about me, and B, it's just not that big of a deal.
Yeah, that's really key. And I mean, that's something that I have to keep on reminding myself of, having that meta view, like I'm up in that plane, because the default is to have what you would call that street level view, where whatever's right in front of me and just being very reactive, you could spot a reactive person. And that's not like the best way to handle yourself or to cultivate different relationships with people, or even dealing with people, like you said, like in the store or something. So I really wanted to hone in on that perspective, because that's a key to being empowered and to this whole process. To me, that was my favorite and most impactful section of the book, even though there's gems throughout.
I love that. And one other piece, and I think that you personally already get this one, but connected to perspective is the whole idea that happiness is a choice. So when I say I'm in charge of my own thoughts, feelings, and actions, I'm also in charge of literally how I see things. So am I seeing it as a success, or am I seeing it as something wrong with me? Am I seeing that I'm going to make the choice to be happy, or do I really want some time to just sort of stick around in my misery? But that's up to us. I mean, there are circumstances that happen in our lives, but the way in which we view them, the way in which we learn from them, and the way in which we take it personally or don't is what really makes a difference in how we feel. So literally the back of my business card says, happiness is a choice. It's work, but it's a choice. And I firmly believe that.
Yeah, that is a tweetable moment right there. Happiness is a choice because so many times, people look at situations or they look at circumstances in life. They look at what they're going through, their job situation, or what's happening to them to determine whether or not they're going to be happy. And it's so much more than that. It's not someone else's responsibility to make you happy, whether it's like your best friend or your significant other. It's not their responsibility to make you happy. So if that's why you're in a relationship or that's why you choose to be someone's friend, you're going to be disappointed all the time because that's not what the goal is. Like the happiness is your responsibility.
Exactly. One of the things that I talk about in regard to relationships, and this involves the metaphor of angel food cake. This one isn't in the book, so this is a new one for you. So I really like angel food cake. That's what I used to always have for my birthday because I have the summer birthday, and I think it's really yummy just the way that it is. But when it was my birthday, I would get angel food cake with whipped cream and strawberries, which was also delicious. It wasn't even better delicious. It was just delicious in a whole different way than the plain angel food cake. But the angel food cake was fabulous all on its own. And that's sort of how I think about relationships, whether that's friendships or intimate relationships, any kind, that we have to see ourselves like angel food cake and fabulous all on our own. And then the relationships that we have adds to that fabulous and makes it a little bit different. But it's not that we're not okay just being who we are, because who we are just starts off as fabulous. And then we get to add the relationship, which is the whipped cream and strawberries or whatever else you want to have for a topping. And that just makes it different and super cool in a different way.
I don't think we're going to have time to go through all 8 of the steps. What's the next one that you want to highlight?
Well, I can never have a day without talking about W and waking up your inner badass. Because as far as I'm concerned, that's my personal favorite.
Okay.
And from my own life story, really, I had a pretty good handle on the steps before that. But own your best self was where I really started to get bogged down. And there was no W for me. There was no inner badass. I wished I was an inner badass, but I was somebody who on the outside looked like I had it all. This is true in a very similar way for many of the people that I've coached. So looking like you've got a great job, you've got friends, marriage, kids, whatever those measures of success are externally. But internally, I worried so much about what other people thought about me. And to the point of, and you probably remember this story, but to the point of years ago, I went to go get a car and I fell in love with this bright yellow car. And when I told people, I think I'm going to get that yellow car, I got a lot of negative responses. People are like, you're having an early midlife crisis and what's wrong with you? And that's a bad idea. And I didn't get the car. And I literally didn't get the car because I got all of this negative feedback. Only it was a car, right? It wasn't like some big moral decision. And yet that's how much I had difficulty just being who I was on the inside, even though the outside looked so competent and confident and capable. And I went for many years sort of really regretting that. And I'm not a big fan of regret, but it was a moment where I knew, because I bought a different car, I knew that I had sort of given in to this like weird kind of peer pressure thing, but about other people's opinions for no good reason. And so I really then began to work on my inner self and valuing myself for who I was. And I came up with this idea of seeing myself and appreciating myself as perfectly imperfect, as we all are. So I don't believe there's any such thing as perfection. And for humans, the best that we can be is perfect in our imperfection because we're human. So like the whole actual perfection thing isn't going to work. And I don't even think that it should be. And so it took me a long time, and literally not until I had fully made those changes in myself and I came to a place where I said, okay, you know what? I've thought about this for like a decade. I'm going to get the car. And then they weren't even making it anymore. So I had to sort of mourn that and recognize that and make the commitment to myself that I was never going to do that again. That if I really felt at a gut instinct level or wanted to do something, I wasn't going to let someone else's opinion stop me. And as soon as I really integrated that piece of self-acceptance, which, by the way, I have been teaching other people for years, but, do as I say, not as I do. And as soon as I really accepted that, literally within 2 days, I then saw a new type of car that was the same beautiful yellow as the one that they were no longer making. And it happens to be a Jeep Renegade, which I thought was awesome. I'm like, yes, Renegade, badass, that's me. I literally went out the day after I saw it and got that car and had the total support of my husband because he knew this had been such an issue for so long. So for me, really coming to wake up my inner badass was getting to that place of saying, you know what, if I think it's a good idea, I'm good with that. Like, why would I let the opinion of someone else stop me in something that I think is fun or good or that just makes sense to me? It's my life. It's not anybody else's life. Another way that I did that, and this is how I really knew that this was coming true, because I had been so sort of insecure inside and concerned about other people's opinions, I wouldn't sort of do like really goofy stuff in public. And one day I was at a big local fair with my family, and they were piping in music from outdoors. And it was just like some great song. So I just started dancing. Like there's a zillion people around. And I just started dancing in the walkway. And my husband and my daughter looked at me and they were appalled. They're like, what are you doing? Stop that. Stop that right now. You're making a fool of yourself. And I said, but it's really good music. Like, I love this song. I just kept dancing. And they're like, we don't even know you. And they walked away.
That sounds like what my daughter does.
Right? Except in that moment, that was fine. Like they didn't have to be near me. I respected that was their choice for them. But I wasn't worried because I loved the music and I was outdoors and, I was just sort of dancing around. Like, what did it matter to me?
It wasn't like you were performing for somebody, like, here,
right.
Come and give me some accolades. You're just having your own experience and having your own joy.
Right. And it was, it was just this moment of joy. Like I can think about it right now and I can call up exactly how free I felt to just be okay doing something, not for attention, but not stopping because of attention. It was really just about me, which, that's the one I'm responsible for.
Mm-hmm. Not only is that like a inner badass moment, but it's also like you're letting your light shine brightly, which is the S and the empowers, because in a way you're that is light when you're just experiencing joy. You happen to have been doing it in a public place. It doesn't mean that everyone else understands it, but you weren't hurting anybody. You were enjoying what you heard. And there's all these little things in the book where Dr. Hallett has mentioned, different songs, like listen to this song, this will empower you. Listen to this song, this is what I thought of. Because I guess when you were writing the book, you had different like theme songs going on that were like encouraging you while you were writing.
Yes. In fact, that's actually how I came up with a name for the process. So I created, to start writing the book, I wanted a playlist that I would play because I wanted a routine. So it was a playlist I was going to play on shuffle, and I wanted every song to create the feelings that I wanted people to feel when they truly are their own best friend. So there's about 25 songs, and that's truly what it was about. Was this is a variety of different things that to me bring that feeling. So like try anything or never give up or superwoman, or I can fly. So all of those were on the playlist. So I would sit down to write, put on the playlist, and because it was on shuffle, I never knew what would start. So that was great. Oh, like Defying Gravity is on that. I love that song because that's that feeling that I want and that I know people can have when they're truly living their best life and being their own best friend. And so, but I created the playlist first before I even had the process. And I just needed to name it in my phone so that I could find it every time. So I had named it Empowers. And then I would sit down and write. And I was working on sort of the sections of the book and what I was going to do. And I knew the 8 areas, but I realized at some point, a couple weeks in, that I needed a name for the process. So I'm looking at the different elements and I'm like, oh, what's an 8-letter word? What is an 8-letter word? And I'm going over and over this. And all of a sudden, I look at those different elements and I was like, oh, empowers. This is empowers. I'm like, oh, that's fabulous. That's my word for the process. And not until 2 days later did I actually sit down to write, put on the playlist, and the name of the playlist caught my eye because, it was an automatic action, so I wasn't paying any attention. And I looked at the playlist, and I'm like, oh my God, I called this playlist Empowers, and it's the Empowers process. Like, how did I miss that?
Yeah, that was divine right there. It's like the perfect word for what this is all about. And I encourage you so much, not that you if you haven't gotten the hint already, I encourage you so much to pick up this book, whether you get the paperback or the Kindle or whatever, just get it and go through the whole thing. It doesn't really matter to me if you go through in order, but make sure that you read everything, try things. Don't think to yourself, okay, well, I've heard this before, whatever. Really go through it, let it, internalize, because whether it's the playlist that she's providing or the inventory or the different exercises, there's going to be something where you're going to say, I've got to work on this. I need to do a little bit better with this. I know that this is something I need to work on. Dr. Kristina Hallett, please give us your information as far as how we can reach you, whether it's at your practice or on social media so that we can connect with you.
Absolutely. So my website is at ownbestfriend8steps.com, and it's just the letter 8. So it's ownbestfriend8steps.com. And on the website, you can sign up. There's all sorts of freebies and different videos that I've made and things that I'm happy to send to people. You can also email me at KristinaMHallett@gmail.com, and that's KRISTINAM as in Marie, HALLETT@gmail.com. You can also find me on Facebook at Own Best Friend 8 Simple Steps. And on Instagram, although on Instagram you have to look under Wisdom Healing. And you can also find me on LinkedIn and Twitter under Kristina Hallett, PhD, AVPP, because in addition to being a life coach, I also happen to be a board-certified clinical psychologist.
Yeah, she's got it going on. So the fact that she let me call her Kristina is awesome. And all of these links, she's got a lot of links, you guys. So if you didn't catch that, you can go to the show notes for this page, which you can find them in whatever player that you're playing, or if you're online, you can go to DoreeAllen.com and look for the Kristina Hallett episode. And all of these links will be here for her website, social media, and even a webinar that she did recently. And so you can get all that information. And of course, you can find the book on Amazon, Own Best Friend. And you can use the hashtag if you want, Own Best Friend. She'll see it and I'll see it. And we'd love to get all of your, comments and questions from this episode, because there's something within this Empowers process that we all need to do, that we all can relate to and need to work on. Before we go, I just want to read one more short excerpt from the book that I think will close out the show really nicely. Do you have any last words for people before I read this, Kristina?
I just want to say that I am so thrilled that you contacted me because it's such a delight to talk with you. And I love how brightly your light shines. And my my belief is that each one of us is like a candle and that our light illuminates and lights up the candles of everyone else. So I absolutely am so happy to have had this opportunity for me to be enhanced by your light and for your light to enhance mine. This is fantastic.
Yeah, this is great. I'm enjoying it. I can't believe that it's been, 45 minutes that we've been talking about this, because I could talk about this on and on, but let me go ahead and read this beautiful ending to this book that is really something that we want you to remember as we close this show. After reading this book, you will be able to understand, accept, and utilize the ability to say yes. Yes to happiness. Yes to seeing your own worth, to being treated well, to living your full potential, to treating yourself with caring, kindness, and compassion. You say yes to being your own best friend, and that enhances all your other relationships. You say yes to knowing that you are awesome, just as you are. So thank you for listening and for kicking it with me. If you like this show, I'd love to have your support. Visit patreon.com/Kicking It with Doree, without the G, to learn more.